Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
The information contained within this podcast does not consider your personal circumstances and is of a general nature only. You should not act on it without first obtaining professional financial advice specific to your circumstances.
Paul Atherton is an ex-Wall Street advisor on a mission to help young people win back their financial power, wealth and security. He does this by helping them understand the hidden world of finance, risk and investments, helps them figure out how it impacts them, and to seize the opportunities to make it work to their advantage. This is Paul Street Journal. I'm here today with Paul Atherton. How are you, Paul?
Hi, Tim. I'm good.
That's good. So I'm really wondering what there is to be excited about in the next decade, let's say. So from the the 2020s, as they're going to be called.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, Tim? Because I try not to tune into the evening news, but when I do and I hear people talking about the economy, I get just a tidal wave of negativity. And, part of it's based in fact, I admit that, but I think a lot of this is a hangover from the GFC because I think every economist now sees the GFC around the corner, a new GFC or a crisis here and a crisis there, which is ironic because no one saw it before, or very few. I think there are a few economists that claim they saw the crisis, but if you really look into it, what they were warning was a recession. But what happened was a financial crisis which caused a recession. I don't know too many people that saw a GFC crisis. A GFC, and to think about that, the GFC, which we probably should drill down to in the future, what was a GFC, but if I were to, do a high-level quote, a GFC, what happened, the financial crisis was I would call a bank run by the banks on the banks. So have you ever seen a bank run, with the long lines? That was happened actually before the GFC. With Northern Rock. They, lines getting their money because if they didn't, it wouldn't be there. And there were classic cases of that, pictures of that early in the 1900s. Anyway, so there was a bank run. That's effectively what? It was a bank run on banks by banks or other financial institutions. So everyone's seeing a crisis around the corner, and it's so funny because before the GFC, I was really nervous. And now everyone's seeing a crisis, and I'm seeing a lot of opportunity, and I'm very excited about the future. I'm not suggesting that we don't have a lot to deal with. Yes, debt is too high, and yes, Europe is a basket case, and yes, China's going to have to rebalance. But there are a lot of things to be very excited about. So I want to just touch on some of these, and perhaps the most important one for me, because I think the impact is quite considerable, and some people call it clean energy revolution, or the way we're now going to be powering ourselves into the future. And I think it's in some circles, the 2020s will be considered the largest and most impactful technology revolution in the history of man. And it'll be very centered around clean energy. Well, a big part of it will be. Now, the reason it's happening in the 2020s because of a convergence of technologies, and a couple of those convergences, I won't go over all of them, but it's the capacity for solar energy to capture the energy from the sun and transform that into usable energy. So that's one. And the other, just huge breakthroughs that have been happening, are the ability to store that energy, so battery storage. Now, all of those have been increasing at significant rates and are consistently significant rates over many, many decades. And we're probably going to see, it looks like, the convergence of that technology, these technologies together, where it will have an impact on you and I in the 2020s. Now, I'd like to use the following example to give you an idea why it's happening. The technology it's been improving at such a rate for a significant amount of time, but you only see it at a certain stage. And the classic example would be the iPhone. So there we had a convergence of data storage, digital imaging, networking. We had touch screens, we had lithium-ion and batteries, and the various sensors that went on, all coalesced pretty much at a time, significantly around the same time, which gave us the ability to put in an iPhone, to put all of that technology into one phone. So data storage, the cost to store information, data storage, has improved 50% every 18 months.
Whoa.
Right?
Wow.
So the cost, and that curve is being consistent for, I think it's about, for as long as you can think.
If
right?
it's consistent,
So
it'd be a line though. If it was consistent,
well, it depends on the way you look at it, but
I suppose,
for every 50%, if you look at it, it looks exponential. It's the power of compounding. So, and digital imaging is the same. It's about 59% improvements per year. Networking costs, the cost of transmitting data the cost of doing that has decreased 50% every 9 months. In other words, these type of things have a consistent tech improvement curve. And what about solar energy? So what about the storage of solar energy? So that enabled the iPhone, and we had the coalescing of all of this different technology to create this one piece of tech. So clean energy, we have solar energy. Did you know that solar energy has improved by 300 times since the 1970s? So essentially in my lifetime.
Wow.
300 times. So in 1970, it cost about $100 for 1 watt.
Yeah.
It's not
much at all.
Not very good. It's now costs about 33 cents for a watt. So
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
now this curve, if you saw it, and again, it's a exponential improvements, essentially 22% increase every year. Or a decrease in the cost per watt. So now since 2000, the installation of solar panels around globally has doubled every 2 years, consistently. Okay? Every 2 years. And it's still very small. But have you heard the old parable about the peasant that the king was so happy about I forget what he did, rewarded the peasant for his good work. So he rewarded him. What did he say? He said, look, if you put a chest board and give me a 1 grain of rice, but double it for every other chess piece, I'll be happy. And the emperor or the king thought that was de minimis. So he thought, no problem, 1 grain of rice. But if you double it every year, every block on the chessboard, pretty much he lost his kingdom.
Wow.
That's what doubling does. So if you double every 2 years in terms of its reach, its input, that means we got 6 more doublings, and it's 100% of energy is solar power.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't mean I expect it to be 100%, but it's hard to get away. We're saying for nearly 20 years, it's doubled every 2 years. It's solar energy power. It's the penetration of solar energy power into the global stage has doubled every 2 years. So that means 6 more doubling. So 12 years, we will have almost saturation of solar panels.
Wow.
Solar energy. Now, there's another energy which I'm very excited about, and I have been, which is nuclear fusion. It's a very tough energy to solve, but it would give you limitless energy. And it's not nuclear reaction. It's not a nuclear power plant. It's a nuclear fusion. That's where you move 2 elements together, makes a heavier element, and it releases energy. You can do this if you can hold that energy in these various large magnets. And what you want to do, it's very difficult to hold that energy together, as you can imagine. So the aim is to get more energy out than it costs the energy to hold that nuclear fusion together. Some feelings, and I've been looking into this quite deeply, is that we might be a lot closer than people think. So maybe in the 2020s. Now, if either of those break through, we're now into very cheap energy. And guess what happens with stock markets and cheap energy?
They go crazy.
So if you look at the 1950s and 60s and the 1990s, so if you can have a casual look at this, It's all underwritten by very cheap energy. And guess what the stock markets did during that time? Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, guess when they reached their peak energy? Well, I say oil in the 70s.
Really? Yeah, right.
Think about the oil shock of the 70s. Okay. So that's when they reached their last peak, probably the peak of all costs of oil, was in June of 2008, which is only several months ahead of the global financial crisis. And the last decade, right? The last booming decade has been underwritten by fracking, shale oil, cheap energy, a big shock. Nobody predicted this. And it's been underwriting a boom in the United States economy, global economy. So never underestimate the impact of cheap energy. I think a lot of my other colleagues that look at the stock market actually forget about energy, focus very much on interest rates only. And I think that's a mistake. So energy is probably, I'm very excited about that, energy in the stock market, and I'm looking at that. The other thing I'm really excited about is quantum computing. So
Sounds pretty fancy.
yes, sounds fancy, but it's actually being done, which I think is fantastic. So you may have heard that we're coming to our limits on regular computing. It's because there are only so much space that you can fit onto a transistor. So a traditional computer does ones and zeros, you probably have heard. So it effectively maps the world into a 0 or a 1, and any of those combinations, it works things out.
It's effectively still the same computer that Alan Turing made.
Almost the fundamentals are the same, 0 and 1. But what the quantum computer does is it molds those together, and a 1 can be a 0. Uses quantum, which I won't get into all the nitty gritty of it, but a quantum can be in a superposition where it's both things at the same time. And what this does to the power of computing is utterly outstanding. To run a quantum computer, you need near absolute zero, which I think is around minus 270 degrees Celsius.
Whoa.
In other words, you can't run that in your backyard. It's got to be in a incredibly
Chilled room.
and a very sophisticated equipment. I think IBM has the largest and most sophisticated, and they're doing, it's some amazing stuff. And I really would encourage people to have a quick look. I think quantum computing has the power to really, it can literally solve problems that a conventional computer cannot solve. And it's very exciting. So I'm excited about quantum computing. And the other thing, which I know I talk about a lot, I'm very excited for the Indian economy and its impact it's going to have on the global economy. I think I mentioned once, twice, maybe 1,000 times that what the globe needs now is demand. One of the most precious resources in the world is demand. And what generates that are young people, and a large cohort of young people. And that's the type of demographics that India has.
Wow.
So I'm hoping with good governance by Modi, some real, improvements in the way they operate and operate their businesses, which is absolutely happening. We're going to have an absolute booming part of the world, a far more important part of the world, and a very good positive impact for the global economy.
Far out. Keep an eye on the Sensex.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Paul.
Thanks, Tim.
Paul Street Journal.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.